Hello and welcome to the Geek on My Sleeve channel. Today we will be doing a spoiler-free book review of Heaven's River, which is Bobiverse Book 4 by Dennis E. Taylor. It is narrated by Ray Porter. So, kind of a synopsis of the book. For me, this book was very much like book 1, where Bob finds the Deltons and is trying to understand their language and interact with them, except for not. It's a little bit more like a James Bond type situation where it's more like subtle and subterfuge and infiltration and, cool abilities and weapons and high tech stuff.
I agree with you there. It's very much return back to the roots, and we get to spend a lot more time with the original cast of Bobs that we get introduced to in book one, as well as get to see, it says so on the back of the cover, so not too much of a spoiler here, the 24 generations out, and I think at one point they talk about there being maybe even thousands, like hundreds, if not thousands of Bobs, and the what they call replicate or replicant drift, replicative drift. I don't know how plural of replicant.
That's one of the things that threw me off in this because it used to be personified as quantum effects. And then in this book, they changed the terminology. It makes a lot of sense as you read through it, but at first it threw me off a little bit. And I'm going to be honest, the first time I read through this book, I was a little disappointed. But thinking about it more, it's a logical, or he personifies it well for a continuation from where we were at. In 1, 2, and 3, we had a lot of environmental pressures that were kind of putting us in a fight or flight mode. And then, as we know, at the end of 3, we get more of a loosening of bonds where we're not beholden to saving the human race. And with that, there's a lot of drift, as it describes, and it's very unique to see what happens. But this book, as much as I was disappointed at the beginning, the end just had me wanting more. There are potentials for additions, there are potentials for crazy amounts of computing power. Please read to understand more there. And oh man, like, yeah, going through it the second and third time, I just fell more and more in love with the book.
Yes, the first three wrap up really well as a trilogy. So with that in mind, book four does well. Kind of continuing on the story, still very much the same feel. Dennis E. Taylor is an amazing writer, but he is so much more well polished at this point. Now having several books under his belt. Um, and yeah, it's longer. I think it's the longest of all the Bobiverse books, yet it doesn't feel too long.
I guess for me, the big part was, even though we had multiple areas that we were reviewing from, it didn't really feel like it had a grand impact. And I'm going to have to pull the quote.
Ah, I piped up. The golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated. Teresa gave me a perplexed look. No, that's the silver rule. What? Had I missed something? There are 3 rules of behavior, Teresa replied, now in lecture mode. The iron rule, treat others less powerful than you however you like. The silver rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated. The golden rule, treat others as they'd like to be treated. Wait, I gestured at Frida with an upheld hand, then to Teresa. How is that better? If I treat you how I want to be treated, I'm not taking into account your desires. Teresa made an imploring gesture. If you are a unitist and can't eat land meat, but land meat is my favorite, the silver rule says I'm behaving morally by offering you a steak if you're hungry. But of course you won't eat it, and in fact may be offended. So the silver rule is still to a large extent about me and my desires. However, with the golden rule, I am obligated to take into account your beliefs and preferences when deciding how best to behave toward you. Does this not produce a better result? Huh, I said. Again, not sounding very smart, Bob. I'll have to think about that. Teresa smiled. That's the best sentence any teacher could hear.
Oh my god, it is such a eye-opening perspective.
Yes. Very good quote. As always, we like to find the life lessons in the books we read, and there are a plenty in here. Ray Porter does a phenomenal job, as always, with the voices of Bob. And like all things, the Bobiverse has evolved at this point in the series. It has been literally 100 plus years since Bob 1.0 died, and we've had a lot of progression. Humanity has now taken to the stars. Like, there's independent cultures developing that we kind of got to see happen in the first 3 books, as well as the PAV, as well as all these other fun things that we're not going to talk about because this is a spoiler-free review, not a spoiler-filled review, which we're trying to get better about doing the recaps, and we'll get to that for you guys eventually. Yet, yeah, it's really interesting to see the factions in the Bobiverse that has developed. A lot of fun references, a lot of good geeky culture in this book because Bob 1.0 was a super geek. I mean, he died at a von Neumann probe convention that, we got to see all of the Star Trek and Star Wars and so many other awesome references from a lot of other books that we've read. I know I've read a lot more sci-fi than Pete has, but Pete and I were talking about all the fun references about our favorite shiny beer can and Starfleet and yeah, we need to get you to read the book. That way you can grok all the references here.
Yeah, and this is very much a you are your own worst enemy kind of books. And through 1, 2, and 3, it makes sense where Bobs are being created to fulfill a role and to serve a purpose. So, due to environmental pressures, and the Bob who is father or creating the other Bobs has those pressures in mind as he creates the clones, that plays a big impact. But now, when they're able to choose their own destiny and they're able to not have such a grasp or a soul crushing, direction, it's really expanded nicely. And yeah, it brings in that, you are your own worst enemy if you let yourself be.
Yes. How does that play out if there's literally hundreds, potentially thousands of you too? Find out more in episode 4 of the Bobiverse. And join us for the upcoming Geek Out, where spoiler-filled talk of the Bobiverse with your favorite not Bobs, though we did frame Jack to listen to this. And we'll talk to you guys more about that as well.
Hope to geek out with you guys here soon.